Unlike other art forms, video game preservation has never really been up to snuff. Disregarding emulation, you're going to, at the very least, need to be lucky enough to own an older console and the game itself. But even that won't guarantee the title will play as it did when it first released, as its servers may have been turned off, leaving a huge part of its functionality inaccessible. Worse still, licensing issues might make it virtually impossible to buy the game in the first place, seeing it removed from digital storefronts and recalled from stores, only to be bought for inflated prices in second-hand shops or online. As a result, there's a plethora of excellent video games, both recent and old, that are a shell of their former selves or, even worse, unable to be played at all. I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and these are 9 amazing video games you can't actually play anymore. First up, an honourable mention, Drive Club. The game which sparked the idea for this list in the first place. In March, Sony announced that their troubled racer Drive Club would be removed from sale and have its servers switched off in early 2020. The reasoning apparently has to do with the licensing deal signed 5 years ago expiring, an issue which plagues just about every game in the genre. Unlike other releases though, Sony clearly don't think that the licenses are worth renewing, and have taken their impending expiration as a sign to end the game completely. And yeah, you can kind of see the reasoning behind it. Drive Club overcame a troubled launch, but the online title's players have dwindled across the past few years, and most racing fans jumped ship to Gran Turismo Sport. Still, it's a shame to see it go. Players will still be able to access the offline modes, but the vision of Drive Club was based entirely around online connectivity, an element which will now be forgotten about as it's inaccessible. Number 9, a whole bunch of Spider-Man games. Making it very clear that superheroes were nothing but a quick, easy cash grab for the company, Activision happily let the licenses for their published Spider-Man games expire following Disney buying Marvel in 2009. A lot of these releases admittedly weren't all that great anyway, and wider Marvel games like X-Men Destiny are probably better off left in the void, but it's still frustrating to see the webhead's entire back catalogue scrubbed from online storefronts. The likes of Shattered Dimensions, Web of Shadows, and the amazing Spider-Man tie-in titles can no longer officially be bought, and are instead doomed to be relegated to second-hand rarities. In a way, that's not the worst fate, and the sad reality is there are a bunch of games only available through these means. But what makes these cases even more egregious is how expensive the games become because of it. Not only are these titles difficult to find in stores, but in the UK at least you're looking at £20+ a pop to own a single mediocre Spider-Man game. And that's if you're on console. On PC, it's virtually impossible to own any of these games properly. Number 8, Gotham City Imposters. While there'll no doubt be question marks appearing over the heads of a bunch of people seeing this entry, for the handful of players who actually bought and got into Gotham City Imposters in 2012, they'll remember the pain of the game servers being switched off. The multiplayer shooter was a Batman game unlike any other, choosing not to focus itself entirely around the Cape Crusader, but rather, if the title hadn't already given away, Gotham City. Waging war on the streets, you were either part of Joker's goon squad or Batman-inspired vigilantes, who used whatever improvised costumes and weapons they could get their hands on to fight back against crime. Mechanically, it was pretty sound, and there was so much scope to develop the idea into something much greater. Sadly, its console servers were shut off after going free to play, with the PS3 version being taken offline in 2014. Number 7, City of Heroes. MMOs are a precarious business. Not only is it ridiculously difficult to break into the market and become successful, but players are always living with the fear that the game they've invested so much of their time into could be switched off at a moment's notice, leaving all their progress and characters nothing more than a distant memory. It's happened time and time again as unlucky, struggling devs have been unable to support their games, but perhaps the biggest tragedy was City of Heroes. Before the likes of DC Universe Online would step in to deliver the dream of a superhero-based MMO, Cryptic Studios' title was filling that gap, delivering a pretty compelling comic book world for players to lose themselves in. It had a pretty good run as well, shipping in 2005 and ending 7 years later in 2012. In its final moments, fans crowded together in the remaining servers to pay tribute to the game before everything was disconnected and it was gone for good into the black nothingness of digital space. Number 6, MAG. Even to this day, Sony have struggled with getting a first-party, first-person shooter franchise off the ground. Sure, the likes of Killzone and Resistance provided solid FPS experiences for PS3 and PS4 owners, but neither of those series were proper competitors to Microsoft's Halo or, more broadly, Battlefield and Call of Duty. They're not behind due to lack of trying though, and in the PS3 era, the publisher threw everything at the wall in the hopes something would stick. Perhaps their most ambitious title was MAG, an abbreviation of Massive Action Game, very original, that at the time crammed in an unprecedented 256 players into one single match. Size and scale isn't everything, but there was a novelty in playing against so many different people, even if the limitations of the hardware were pretty clear. Sadly, Sony pulled the servers in 2014, rendering it unplayable, and it's an IP unlikely to be revisited anytime soon. Number 5. Evolve. Our very own Ash Millman's favourite game of all time, absolutely, definitely, for sure, do not at her. The problem with Evolve was mostly rooted in the problems of its publisher, 2K. From its very first announcement, it was clear the company was treating the multiplayer shooter as a way to get as much money from players as possible, with an egregious season pass rollout of content planned that punished those who only paid the $60 entry fee for the base experience. It was a shame because at its core, Evolve was a damn fine asymmetrical shooter. The idea of a team of players coordinating and hunting down a player-controlled monster is awesome, and something other games have run with far better since this title launched. It wasn't perfect, of course, but what live service game is? In the right hands, it could have been moulded into something truly special. The botched launch seemingly soured too many people though, and even a move to a free-to-play model couldn't convince players to jump on board, and the dedicated servers were shut down in late 2018. It is technically playable via peer-to-peer, but it's like stepping into the Wild West, trust me. Number 4. Paragon. You might be forgiven for thinking that Paragon was a fully finished game, considering the ridiculous amount of money Epic threw at the marketing for the multiplayer hero shooter. Its beta was plastered all over Sony storefronts in particular, encouraging people to pick up microtransactions for a game that wasn't even technically finished yet. Yeah, it was the kind of corporate greed blatantly on display that everybody hates, but the core experience of Paragon was actually quite compelling. The environments were stunning, the heroes were inspired, and the combat itself was as solid as you'd expect from the publisher of Gears of War. The base was there for the developers again to craft something special. But then, Fortnite happened. When Epic's Battle Royale mode for the then struggling Fortnite dropped, it changed everything and became the publisher's primary focus. In order to support its unprecedented growth, Paragon was cancelled, with resources shuffled into supporting Epic's world-conquering phenomenon. Number 3. Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. The tragedy of Scott Pilgrim vs. the World still stings today. Everyone knows that the cult classic movie failed miserably at the box office despite its quality, but what's less known is how its video game tie-in suffered a similar fate. Released by Ubisoft to coincide with the movie, the side-scroller was a gorgeous recreation of the comic's art style and tone, absolutely nailing the world of these characters in a 2D brawler. It's exactly the kind of game Scott Pilgrim himself would have played endlessly. Despite gaining a loyal fanbase though, the title was delisted 4 years after it launched in 2014 due to licensing issues. For years, fans have been vocal about wanting to see it back on storefronts, and Scott Pilgrim creator Brian Lee O'Malley has stated multiple times that the ball is entirely in Ubisoft's court. Sadly, it doesn't look like the company has any interest in getting this side-scroller back in stores anytime soon. Number 2. The Simpsons arcade game. From one side-scrolling beat-em-up to another, the Simpsons arcade game was a seminal title, and no doubt a huge reason why every kid growing up in the 90s was always so totally broke. Admittedly, the title is more iconic than it is actually good, but the ability to play as these sprite recreations of your favourite Springfield town members and beat the ever-loving snot out of enemies with Bart's skateboard because, let's face it, you always chose Bart, made it an arcade staple. It was ported to consoles in the early 2010s, even being free for a time for PlayStation Plus members, but its renewed relevance didn't last long. In 2013, it was removed from the PlayStation Store, with Xbox following suit shortly after. There'll probably still be some OG arcade machines kicking around somewhere, but finding one will be rarer than anyone picking to play as Lisa. Number 1. PT. It might be a little bit of a cheat to put PT at number 1, considering that its name literally signifies its purpose as a playable teaser for the cancelled Silent Hills, but it functions as such a great short experience in its own right that it more than deserves its place. Dropping out of nowhere back in 2014, the atmospheric horror game blew everyone away before they even knew its connection to Konami's premier horror franchise. The photorealistic graphics and ability to generate such palpable dread and tension without resorting to an endless stream of jump scares made it essential for any horror fan, and the game it promised to represent was even more tantalizing. Of course, it wasn't to be, and after Konami's public falling out with director Hideo Kojima, Silent Hills was cancelled. Adding salt to the wound, the publisher also pulled PT from the PlayStation 4 store, meaning that unless you have a console with the game already downloaded on it, there's no way to experience the pure horror of the game firsthand. So that's our list. I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below, and I know you can technically play some of these games, but you can't on every single console or system. But either way, while you're down there, could you give us a like, share, subscribe, and head over to WhatCulture.com for more lists and news like this every single day. Even if you don't though, I've been Josh, thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon.